Okay, so now I'm going to present on cognition, which is basically a fancy way of saying thinking, remembering, judging, and problem solving. So some of the sort of skills and functions that our brain allows us. So first of all, we'll talk a little bit about the progression, then I'll go on to talk about some strategies that can help. So there are various types of onset of CJD, and cognitive onset is quite common. So it might be the first symptom that you actually notice and starts ringing alarm bells that there might be something amiss. And that tends to be quite an insidious onset, starting slowly. So you might notice your loved one or the person you're caring for misremembering words, forgetting names, forgetting places. Attention and concentration can start to become impaired at this stage, and sort of staying on task and things, so people can get distracted very easily. And you may well have noticed that it's the short-term memory that tends to be affected first. Long-term memory tends to be very well preserved for certainly a period of time. So people may be able to talk about things from the past, but not things that have happened that day or perhaps over the course of the last week or so. In the moderate stages of the illness, people will become increasingly disorientated to time, place, and person, and may not recognize where they live, even if they've perhaps lived there for many years, and start not being able to recognize people, which later on can become quite hurtful. But it's just if somebody's unable to recognize loved ones, maybe spouses, partners, children, and things, but it is obviously just a symptom of the disease and needs to be seen as such. And forgetting how to do things, particularly things, sequential tasks that require a number of different distinct tasks to be done in sequence, like maybe making a cup of tea or even just going to the toilet and getting all the stages of that in the right order. And then later on in the advanced stages, people will become unable to use tools and objects such as cutlery. They'll be increasingly unable to make judgments around safety and things and make choices. So limiting choices can be useful, as Margaret says, but later on in the disease, even simple choices will become impossible. And people will increasingly lose an awareness of their surroundings and just not be able to make sense of the world around them in the way that they once did. I'll have a look at some of the strategies at these different times. So at the onset, often people will try to employ tactics for kind of what we might call reality orientation. So it's helping people to sort of stay as independent as possible and to sort of manage the problems associated with the milder end of cognitive impairment. So use of things like a diary or a wall planner or whiteboard where you can write up the schedule for the day or for the week can be useful here. Labeling drawers, for example, can be useful. There's all kinds of assistive technology out there these days. Date time clocks can be useful for people who are disorientated to time. We found it's often best to stick to an analog clock because they're better understood for longer. There's a product called Memorabel, which is very useful, where you can actually sort of program things into essentially like an alarm clocks, and it flashes up graphics on the screen saying it's time to take your midday pills, for example. And that can actually be useful for carers as well, who have always got a lot on their plates and may forget particular medication administration times, for example. So that can be useful for both carer and patient. GPS trackers as well. Obviously, a lot of people have got these on their phones, and that might promote independence while that is still possible, so people can go out into the local area without the risks associated with getting lost. So, as I say, promoting independence where possible. As a carer, not necessarily sort of steaming in and taking over all aspects of somebody's life, but actually sort of picking up where the deficits start, if you like, so that people can continue the way they were for as long as possible. Obviously, driving very quickly becomes unsafe, particularly in CJD. Other types of dementias that have a longer course, people might be able to drive for longer, But given the rapid cognitive decline associated with this illness, driving is really not recommended after diagnosis for public safety reasons. And you should really notify the DVLA of the diagnosis as well. And to avoid cognitive overload, so similar to what Margaret was saying around communication, just trying to keep things short and simple, not overloading somebody's limited cognition with too many tasks in tandem. In the more moderate stages, people will require increasing supervision and prompting. This is as their appreciation of risk deteriorates along with the cognition. There is an approach known as validation, which is very useful to employ at this stage, which is in a nutshell, sort of going with the flow, and it's about not, if you like, contradicting the person's perception of reality and not entering into arguments with them about what it is that they're perceiving in the world around them, but validating their perception of reality, because ultimately you may be able to persuade someone into your way of thinking, but in the process of doing that, it may cause some upset, and the emotional impact of that may live with the person for longer than the information or that you've managed to persuade them into agreeing with. At this stage, reminiscence therapy can be useful. As we were saying, long-term memory tends to be well preserved. So while someone is still able to look at photos or other sort of memorabilia from their lives and things, that can be really useful to tap into those memories that are better preserved. Rummage boxes as well, perhaps a box with various items from around the home that can stimulate conversation and things. Music is really, really key here and taps into some very, very long-term memories that can be useful throughout the disease. And obviously, as a carer, we need to be incredibly patient and understanding and appreciate that it really is the effects of the disease, and it's not people trying to be difficult or awkward. It's just the disease affecting their ability to think clearly. And so gentle activity, things based on what it is that people previously enjoyed, whether that's cooking, where perhaps somebody might still be able to contribute to that by mixing something, or just sticking within somebody's sort of limitations, maybe gardening and thinking about how you might be able to provide some exposure to those things that somebody enjoyed despite the limitations that they're experiencing. And in the advanced stages, as I said, when somebody's really struggling to make sense of the world around them, we sort of employ more of a sort of sensory stimulation approach. Again, music can be really, really useful here. There are various sensory aids which are available these days, including fiddle muffs and things which can provide stimulation to all the various senses. And touch and massage can be really, really useful here to show somebody, that you care and love for them, and really sort of make a connection even beyond the time when they're not really understanding or able to engage in any kind of conversation. There is a technique called the M technique, which you can find on YouTube. If anyone's interested in finding out more about that, then do let me know, which is a really good sort of simple massage technique for somebody's arm and hands. And really, increasingly, your body language and tone of voice becomes important in these advanced stages of the disease, and will provide a lot of reassurance, even if someone's not necessarily able to understand what you're saying. As I say, just your tone of voice can provide a lot of reassurance and have a real calming effect on somebody. So perhaps reading out passages of books or poems and things like that, if you can't think of anything to actually talk about, so to speak.